Hey everybody. So I just want to share some of my personal financial bets for next year. So these are just some of the work that I'm doing in my personal time, looking at what I think will happen in 2023, where I think different parts of the economy are really going to move to, and then what in turn I'm looking to do in order to prepare for that. So firstly, just on the property front, and just to set it out, all of these bets and assumptions, they are very, very simple, not based on any deep analysis or forecasting. I think we can make some simple good bets without doing all of that work. Just keep it really basic based on what we see. So firstly, when you look at housing, so I'm looking at housing both from the perspective of somebody who's what you call an owner occupier. So I own my home, as well as somebody who invests in property. So for us as owner occupiers, if you own your home, my bet for 2023 is the simple cost of running it is going to go up. I think there's very little doubt about that. So if you have, for example, a mortgage that you will be looking to refinance through 2023, mortgage rates are currently a number of percentage points higher than they were at this time last year. And it seems reasonable that you'd look and think mortgage rates, even if they come down, which they have been, and in the UK we've just started seeing rates below 2-year fixed rates below 5%, we are unlikely, short of a massive economic shock like we've seen in 2008 and during COVID, we are unlikely to see incredibly low interest rates, which means that the mortgage rates that we're paying are likely to be higher. That's on both the maintenance as well as the purchase side. So maintenance, I mean, in terms of paying your mortgage, it will be higher. And obviously if you're purchasing, you'll see higher costs as well. But then all the costs around the home are obviously increasing as well. So we've seen council taxes increase. We see energy prices continue to increase. We're likely to see water rate increase. And if you're buying food, which we all are, I mean, the inflation hitting food, I think is quite horrific. We heard 10% a while ago. I've been saying for a long while, I think everybody's undershooting this by a good 5 to 10%. I would bet that if you look at the cost of your food shop now versus the comparable time last year or the year before, my bet is you're paying 20% more for the same goods. And one of the ways that you kind of stealthily see people increase price is they shrink what you're buying. So if you look, this is a really weird example, but I like a Twix every now and again. It's a chocolate bar. You make the product a lot smaller, but charge the same price. So the cost for the amount of product has increased significantly because you've made what you're selling smaller. So I think in the case of Twix, it looks to me like they've kept the price the same, but they've halved the product. So they're doubling their margin on that, and it's costing me twice as much for the same amount of food. I think we're seeing that all over, and it's likely to be something that we see impacting all aspects of domestic cost next year. Now, some of the ways I'm looking to offset that, if it happens, great. If not, at least we've had a go. There could be a lot to be said for trying to get into more renewable energy sources. So I think some people, for example, in some places, and we used to have it in the UK, but it's tailored off, have got great grants and incentives for green energy. So for example, if you want solar panels, if you want different types of insulation, some places will allow you to put your wind turbines. So renewable sources of energy production, which let you consume that energy for yourself and also then sell any excess to your national energy grid. That could be a great option to look into for 2023. And it's something that I'll definitely be looking at, particularly things like solar panels, because I think we've had quite a lot of sunlight. In the UK, even now, you can see it's a really mild winter. So if there's a chance to both be more self-sufficient, as well as maybe make a little bit of upside, I think it's a great one to look into. Then you've got the natural nature of things like of cutbacks, just as simple as you can make it. The biggest opportunity is possibly in food consumption. What we often see, especially in the West, the developed West, is we will have a lot of convenience food, a lot of nutritionally poor, snacky type food, so it doesn't really fill you up, and nutritionally it's not very great. And we also over-index on things like Deliveroo and Uber Eats, so we order in a lot and still eat out a lot. it's completely shifted the dynamics on how we look at food consumption and the economics of food, because you've got dining out increasing your cost, you've got your shopping having got more expensive, the utilities that you use to create the food has got more expensive, and so it's a massive shift in how our money is just kind of outflowing. So that's going to be a big correction. We already have rules in our home about limiting eating out significantly. We've cancelled all delivery services and even deleted the apps. And now what we're doing is looking far more at the nutritional aspect of everything that we have been producing, coming up with some simple meals, nutritionally rich, and trying to make those a consistent staple on our shopping lists. It's just simple adjustments that are going to make us fitter, but also save a lot of money. When you then think about broader consumption, right? So not things to necessarily run your home, but what you have in it. The typical things that we look at would be things like any shopping that we do for clothes, quite standard. Any goods that you have around your home. So all of your discretionary spend on televisions, music, camera equipment, if you smoke maybe, books, whatever it is, all elements of consumption, all under review. Because I think what we've probably seen is any price inflation has undoubtedly hit all goods. So typically inflation rates right now are running at kind of like 10 to 15% when you look at the UK and the US. So all those goods have increased. Wages typically do not increase anywhere near that kind of rate. You might be talking about like 3% if you're fortunate. So there could be like a delta, a difference there of about 10%. So in order to make up that 10% shortfall, right? 10% being the difference between inflation in the economy and how much your wage has gone up. In order to make up that shortfall, what you really need to do, unfortunately, is either cut back or find another way to make more income. And more income tends to be a lot harder, so obviously cut back is the simplest thing to do. So I think it's going to be finding a way to decrease all domestic costs by 10%. Now, the first thing that we've gone after in our home is holidaying. Now, holidaying for many is an important part of what you do, and it could be going away anywhere, somewhere domestic, somewhere abroad, it doesn't really matter. But what you tend to find is it's a large cash outflow. It's taken you ages to save for it. You need spending money whilst you're there, and it's a large outflow. The return can be quite limited, but actually the amount of effort it takes to really recover from your holiday spend can sometimes be absolutely huge. I think people underestimate that quite easily. So we've taken the rule, maybe a bit drastic, hopefully we stick to it. No holidays for 2023, nothing abroad at least anyway. I think what's going to be more likely is looking at other ways of getting value for our free time. So what would we normally spend on a holiday? Just say, for example, well, I won't tell you how much we spend, because I mean we might be spending a bit more than some, but we're looking at what we would typically spend, taking 10% of that number, and then looking to distribute that on on different options. So, for example, memberships to lovely parks, lovely green spaces. There are certain cards, credit cards actually, that have got different perks associated with them that we feel if we were to have those, we may be able to utilize those perks and then create some different experiences. You then may be able to do some kind of smaller trips as well, just local trips in the UK. Again, just within that 10% budget. So that's leaving literally 90% of what we would typically spend on a holiday is now going towards other things. Frankly, it may just sit in a little insurance pot, an insurance pot of cash, just to pay for some of the unknowns that we could be experiencing. But to have the option, that's what is really the key thing. And I spoke a couple of weeks ago about making sure your margin for safety is greater. The play for us now is to increase that margin for safety as much as possible. So it's making those kind of adjustments, and knocking off 90% of our holiday spend is going to be huge. Using the remaining 10% and actually being willing to spend that, it still gives us some great options. We're lucky in that respect. But what it does do is it also gives us that nice chunky amount of cash just for insurance purposes. And that's going to help us sleep better at night. So it seems like a really good bet. I think then looking at the investment horizon, it's still always, I think it's all still up in the air, totally up in the air. And frankly, so much of our normal mass market investment is so manipulated. I'm not even sure if you want to put money in there in the first place anyway. My feel is that a much better play is probably to go into something like gold and silver, and failing that is just to simply put your cash in an account which simply offers you an okay predictable amount of interest on your cash. Like, it's not doing anything fancy, but again, it simply helps you sleep better at night. All of these things, in my opinion, are preferable to banging money in stocks and shares and all the rest of it, because the last few years have just shown us very little good news. My pension pot, and I invest quite aggressively, is down 40%. And it's kind of staggering, because I'm lucky that I don't need that money right now. But if you are somebody who does actually rely upon your pension pot and you are facing a 40% knock, especially if you're close to retirement, I mean, my gosh, it just tells you everything you want to know about not wanting to be in that asset, versus just having the cash in the bank, predictable rate of interest. You're going to sleep better at night. And the more I go through this and the more I learn at this kind of time, is the more sleeping better at night is just a better play. It's like it's trumping everything right now. Like, it really almost doesn't matter in some respects about what how I perceive an upside. It's like, if something lets you sleep better at night, it's probably worth doing. So the other big bet for next year is, I think we're going to see a lot more of us lose a lot of time and productivity to social media. Now, this was a really interesting one that particularly came out of COVID, right? Because through COVID, we're all just kind of cooped up in our homes. Social media and our presence on it increased significantly. There was such a big lift, even compared to the previous 12 months where adoption was always increasing anyway. But what seems to have happened is we're still heavily relying on social media channels, and there's still a huge amount of social media consumption. It tends to give us a bit of an escape when our lives seem to be at quite a difficult point. Now, what looks to be quite possible in the next year is that more people are going to struggle, right? Because all the economic challenges we see, they're going to impact certain people more. That's just a fact. Well, if you're impacted by these challenges and you want some kind of escape from your reality, well, naturally, social media can be there for you. It can be Twitter, it could be browsing on Instagram, it could just be what you're watching on Netflix or whatever it may be. I'm putting them all in the social media bucket. But what it does do is that eats up our ability to actually start using our brain for other more productive things. And one of the hardest things, and it's something I'm saying to my son, and he's only 3, but I'm saying it to him now, and I think he's kind of getting it, is no addiction is considered good. So if someone said they're a drug addict, they'd be looked at as being a bad thing. If they were an alcohol addict, it would be looked at as it being a bad thing. Well, what if you're a social media addict? Can we justify that, or should we be looking at that as a bad thing as well? One of the interesting things about it is a drug addict, an alcohol addict, are lower in number, arguably lower in number, than social media addicts. There's a strong argument that looks and says, if you look at the amount of time that populations spend on their phone and on social media platforms, there is a strong argument that says more of the world are social media addicts than there are alcohol or drug addicts. It's a very strong argument. When we think about that, I think the biggest thing that we need to try to be mindful of and conscious of is not to allow our brains and our abilities to get too consumed. Use the platform for learning, use the platform for a little bit of relief, but don't lose all of our time in it. We still need to have books. We still just need to have books all around us, and we still need to be consuming these books regularly to make sure that our minds are able to develop. We have to just keep learning, and it keeps us stronger and it keeps us happier. So I think that's going to be one of the big costs of next year, is going to be the cost of attention, is going to be the cost of focus, is going to be the cost of keeping our minds fresh and active. So again, get some books, not just audio books, get the physical books, feel the pages, have a proper bedtime routine where you put your phones away, get rid of the blue light, read a book, calm yourself, meditate, sleep well, get at least 7 to 8 hours, and then keep working through that consistent schedule. So guys, those are some of my big bets for next year. It's a blend of things that we see happening in the economy, things that we see that we can control, I guess, directly within our own households, as well as then the way in which we are looking after our personal energy, our personal fitness, our personal mentality. That for me is the crux of a bigger challenge that is going to start emerging. But I think if we can start to look at a few components immediately, figure out what we can just improve upon, and then just go after that, it starts to put us in a better position, because the point is that we keep growing over time. So right now, we can look at household expenses, both the cost of upkeep our home, as well as the cost of everything within our home, and we can get our personal fitness right. The next thing is that we can start thinking about investments. We can start looking at other macroeconomic indicators. We can look at job markets. We can start to put different parts of the picture together and start to come up with just different ways of trying to help ourselves both survive and then grow to thrive. As ever, guys, we'd love to know what you think. We'd love to know what else you're doing in your own life. If you've got any questions, as ever, just ping them across, and you can find us on all platforms at Avoiding Broke. Speak to you next week, guys. See you soon. Bye.